Здравейте, драги зрители! When delving into the lore's depths, there are some risks involved. Possibly the most common one is simply shifting dirt for vast swaths of time without discovering anything worthwhile. A less desirable one is coming upon something that evokes your ire. But, in this rat's opinion, among the most painful is finding something charming that eventually is not just never mentioned, but nearly fully removed from the setting's tapestry. In today's case, I'm particularly referring to the squads. Mere dwarfs in space, as known by most, is too uncharitable an interpretation of them. Originally conceived as long-lost human colonies whose populations evolved into the familiar dwarvish frame, adopted ancestor worship, and retained somewhat strange but exceptionally potent technology from before humanity's fall. Their skills, tools, and defensive works making them such lethal combatants that the Space Marine legions were forced to reorganize, developing new tactics and technologies just to be able to bring them to heel and reinduct them into the Imperium as abhumans, convinced that the Emperor was their most ancient and ultimate ancestor, hence claiming the pinnacle seat of their pantheon. Regrettably, the illustrious Homo sapiens rotunduses, yes, that's what they were called, star would fall with the Tyranid's first breaches into the galaxy, when an unnamed Hive Fleet wiped them out as an established faction, leaving only stranded pockets of them, such as on Necromunda. Of course, they would be revived in recent times as the Leagues of Votan, clones that at this point have genetically diverged so far from humanity that they can't even be considered abhuman, intermingled with other, supposedly sentient machines, all working in service to actual AI that have begun suffering from manually induced dementia due to being force-fed the bodies and minds of all of the dead clones and machines. But, as cool as some may think they are, from what I've encountered, a significant amount of people are not fully swayed by the Leagues. We just miss and want to have more genuine space dwarfs. This is where one of Warhammer's best qualities shines: homebrewing. Now, before you flee in terror, hear me out. I know homebrewing is a somewhat contentious topic, being looked down on due to the admittedly difficult volume of not-so-great ones, but it is still a cornerstone of the hobby that has helped it flourish. Prime examples of which being how many worlds, armies, or Stardeep chapters beloved in the canon are in fact the homebrews of the Black Library authors and other Games Workshop staff or affiliates. With that in mind, I'd like to give this format a shot, if you'd indulge me. Thus, as the Leagues are about to get their first book, which may have already been released by the time of this upload, I wanted to put forward this creation I have been hammering out to possibly cheer some of you up by satisfying the craving for space dwarfs. Also, this is a bit of an example for the crossing of franchises stories I eventually plan to make, as the basis of this homebrew is bringing Deep Rock Galactic into 40k in a way that makes sense in-universe. Thank you for sticking with this preamble. Now, for your entertainment, I'd like to present the Stardeep Guilds.
The Stardeep Guilds is the collective name of a number of disparate factions comprised of abhumans from the Homo sapiens rotundus genus, who have begun surfacing to the fore of galactic affairs more often in recent times, after having survived near extinction at the claws of the Tyranids. Their terrestrial holdings predominantly consist of mining and trading outposts, as the majority of their people live upon what are known as void holds, imposing star fortresses capable of traversing the warp. Bar some exceptions, instead of fielding war fleets, the guilds use the resources for such an endeavor to continuously expand and strengthen their void holds, or to create new ones, outfitting them with defensive and offensive technology retained or rediscovered from their ancient days, or obtained by means that are frowned upon by certain branches of the Imperium. Due to being left to their fate when the Tyranids invaded their space, the survivors that now comprise the Stardeep Guilds denounced the tenets of the Mechanicus, instead committing the blasphemy of innovation, conducted on their own, with the help of Xenos such as the Chikero or Tau, or, in some cases, darker entities still. through which these squats arm themselves with weaponry of ancient and revived designs, as well as supplementing their numbers with automata expressly constructed and programmed to be in all ways subservient to their stout masters, akin to domesticated animals, receiving no veneration beyond appreciation for their usefulness, aesthetics, or cases of sentimentality. These dispositions, however, are kept private and hidden as much as possible from other human factions, as the Imperium remains as the biggest trade partner and ally of the guilds, necessitating placating as to not turn it into another enemy. While the details of their equipment may vary, depending on where in the galaxy they are found and the forces they have allied themselves to, multiple commonalities unite the Stardeep guilds, prime among which is technology for the manipulation of gravity. Through it, the squats have developed equivalents to drop pods and boarding torpedoes, capable of ferrying nearly anything, ranging from mortal troops to heavy vehicles, by nullifying the gravitic forces within the carrying compartments, yet still allowing them to very quickly board incoming vessels, deploy to terra firma, and even embed themselves beneath the ground by drilling into its crust, as well as then disengaging and returning to the void with independent maneuverability. Disgorging the guilds as combat miners, clad in powered armor, comparable to that of the famous Solar Auxilia, and facing their foes with a plethora of specialist weapons reminiscent of the Great Crusades era. Or in heavier, retrofitted mining exosuits, which may equal the plate of the Emperor's Angels in durability, but hold no candle to its speed or maneuverability. The latter of these panoplies of war serve less as power armor equivalents and more so as mobile weapon platforms, allowing their bearers to carry into battle heavy guns or melee equipment that is of Astartes caliber, despite the notable size difference. "You might be the divine work of a god, buddy, but this here crime against life in my hands couldn't care less. And unlike you, I come pre-ducked." Despite being more than capable of fighting on open battlefields, in their quest to obtain new technologies and rare mineral riches needed for their production and maintenance, the Stardeep guilds' warriors always aim to conduct war in the most beneficial way for them, within the confines of spaces where their smaller stature and oftentimes significantly superior firepower allows them to handle physically and numerically superior foes more optimally. A tactical and strategic necessity, given the extremely limited manpower their kind possesses in comparison to other factions. Thus, very rarely do they amass armies in one place. Instead, their style of combat is more surgical, waged by individuals, squads, or small warbands, oftentimes working as mercenaries or agents for larger organizations that can afford their services. Services that have become significantly more sought after in recent times. Other than tunnel fighting or void breaching, the warriors of the guilds have developed another specialization: xenocide, particularly the combating of tyrannids. Near the tail end of the First Tyrannic War, a fringe tendril of behemoth extended towards the galactic core, reaching the home system of the Stardeep guilds' ancestors. Despite its relatively small size, the tendril was able to overpower the defending fleet of ships and strip half of the habitable worlds in the system of all life, save the few sublight vessels that were able to evacuate meager numbers to the remaining ones. Hails for aid were sent as soon as the Xenos' path was predicted, but the only forces capable of intervening, a few Mechanicus-held systems, elected to abandon them in favor of fortifying their own dominions. Due to this slight, the future guilds would hold the followers of the machine god in utmost contempt. It, along with a recorded history of strife against the Men of Iron's rebellion and future encounters with the likes of the Necrons, would lead to these squats refusing to view machines as anything else but tools for them to use, let alone as something divine. Even if successful, Behemoth's invasion was not easily achieved. By the time they only had a few planets to gorge on, their bioships' numbers were severely diminished. Believing itself supreme in the void due to there being no more enemy vessels, the Hivemind disgorged its numberless armies upon the planets with the intent of simply drowning the remaining defenders that had dug themselves in. Before the fighting was even done, the capillary towers were already erected for the bioships to feed on. It was then that the cunning ploy of the valiant abhumans would be revealed to their enemy. A significant portion of their warriors had volunteered to stay behind in order to give the foul beasts the false impression that they were the last remnants of opposition left alive. But, as the last of their lines were devoured by the depleted reserves of the Tyranids, the handful first ever Voidholds, carrying on them the remaining survivors of their kind, burst from those few planets' crusts and anchored themselves in orbit, within firing range of the feeding bioships. Unable to react in time, all of the alien vessels were savaged out of the skies and sent plummeting down. Victory, and in turn survival, had been achieved, but the cost for it was truly staggering for the surviving populace, especially given how the last few still habitable worlds near them were doomed to be the prisons of the teeming insectoid masses now cut off from the greater hive mind, as the bulk of Behemoth was broken far away. Wallowing in despair could have been their fate, if it was not for the rallying words of a particular individual who supposedly orchestrated their winning strike, remembered by most at present as the living ancestor at their lowest moment. Yes, we still survive, but how long will that last? What cost did we pay for this privilege? Our most noble, devoured, our final bastions, infested to bursting with the monsters that slaughtered them, and the rest of our once glorious anchor left as naught but barren rock and naked stone. How are we to continue on?
How, you ask? By staying true to our blood and ways. By not dishonoring the sacrifice of our lost and renowned. The Malakura Crunk left only rock and stone in their wake. And with just rock and stone, our truest and staunchest allies, we still prevailed. Their infernal quest to doom and devour us all has failed. Foul alien curs shall never know victory, for as long as our kin still draw breath. And even if it takes us uncountable millennia, we shall reclaim our homes.
Thus were the Stardeep Guild's core tenets of life hammered out. Dedicating one's life to the pursuit of excellence in all dealings, as duty to both one's living kin and their ancestors, with great importance being placed for one to uphold honor and diligence, as to be worthy to stand in the presence of either group. In recognition of their dire situation and depleted population, arguably their greatest teaching would be to leave no kin behind whenever possible, for the life of each one was a vital necessity to their whole. Soon the squats would begin conducting expeditions down into the depths of their fallen worlds, intended to either recover any of their lost technological marvels, extract the exotic mineral wealth for which the worlds were originally colonized, or to cleanse as many of the Tyranids as possible. In a cruel twist of fate, the Xenos cancer that injected itself into their homes had begun to adapt to their new environment, entrenching itself and spewing forth renewed legions that could not return to their spacefaring ways, but would deny solace to their now void-dwelling foes. The living ancestor would be lost in one such expedition, as he remained to hold back a swarm of the bioforms, while the rest of his squad extracted themselves back aboard their drop pod. As no sign of his demise was ever found, to this day it is believed that he still roams the caverns of the planet, bringing death to the Tyranid menace. To honor him, statues of his like would be crafted in the memorial hall of each Voidhold, watching over the stone-etched names of all kin whose lives were given for the future of their kind. This veneration of his would lead to a particular quirk to develop within the guild's societies. It is said that the living ancestor never hid his face behind any protection so that he could inspire his people, and as he allowed no fault to touch it, even in the face of dangerous enemies, a great beard adorned it. Attempting to follow his example, brash, brazen, brave, and foolish individuals amongst the kin also forego the protection of their faces and strive to grow beards of their own. Given the hazardous nature of their lives, it is more common than not for them to perish than their comrades who were content to use all of their war gear. However, those among them who manage to endure the task through mastery and prowess wear their beards as badges of proof of their skill, the greatness of which tends to grant them higher status in their societies. Over time, more Voidholds were born, and the guilds began to split into greater numbers. Some would choose to leave the cradle of their home system for greater bounty in the galaxy. Those who continue to toil against the ever-growing and evolving thieves of their home are known as the Hearthbound. The ones venturing out into the stars broadly fall under two kinds. Departing in search of greener pastures and new lives are the Far Delvers. Due to their more mercantile nature, they have spread to be the most common type of Stardeep guild. Contrasting them are the Grudge Settlers, guilds whose denizens' contempt of the ones that robbed them of their home burned so bright that their combined military might actively seek out the presence of tyranid fleets in order to exterminate them from the galaxy, destroying anyone who would get in their way and refuse to get out of it. They are the ones more likely to amass fleets of ships alongside their voidholds, though oftentimes it is not direct investment by the guild itself. When members of other guilds are exiled, or left as the sole survivors of their guilds, they can either turn to the life of a mercenary or corsair, but can also seek redemption of their honor by joining a grudge settler guild and adding their personal vessels to its assets. There are also rumors of another kind of Stardeep guild that have been cited more frequently after the galaxy split. Individuals or entire voidholds who, in their pursuits, have fallen under the influence of darker entities, receiving teachings of blasphemy that should never have been attained. But all other squats belonging to the main three types refuse to acknowledge said rumors as anything else but. Pragmatic necessity, often underpinned by profit-seeking, has pushed the Stardeep guilds to actively search for cooperation and alliances with larger factions, solidifying these bonds by working as infiltrators, prospectors, or simply selling some of their rare resources. To the great discomfort of some of the Throne's agents, while most of the guilds drift closer to the Imperium, even fairly grudgingly working with the Mechanicus, a not insignificant number of them have been swayed to partner with Xenos, making use of the services of the Tau, Jokero, and even some rare instances of grudge settler voidholds joining forces with Orc freebooters in certain battlefields closer to Tyranid hunting grounds. Even so, there are still beings out in the galaxy that the guilds refuse to approach other than to obliterate. Thus far, no common ground has been found between any Stardeep guild or a Necron dynasty. And most extremely of all, the squats have learned to differentiate between the disparate factions of the Eldar with staggering accuracy. Predominantly because the Craftworlders and Corsairs can make for great business partners, while any Drukhari are treated in the same vein as the Tyranids, namely to be shot on sight whenever possible. One can only wonder what and how many encounters between these factions must have happened in the deep of space in order for such a powerful grudge to seemingly spread across all of the guilds. Discounting more specific cases, the Hearthbound guilds in general can be considered the most isolationist when it comes to their alliances. Members of the Omnissiah's faith are prohibited from entering their territories, as their betrayal is not forgiven, allowing for no tolerance, unlike by some other guilds. Being blessed with the eldest voidholds, which have steadily grown to terrifying behemoths of the cosmos, aids them to maintain this level of sovereignty. However, one could argue that an even greater tool that helps perpetuate their dominion are the more powerful external interests affiliated with them. Nearly all of the Hearthbound's trade with the wider Imperium is facilitated by a small handful of rogue trader dynasties that the guilds have deemed worthy enough to enter their space. To them, the Abhumans' isolation is seen more as a contract of exclusivity, through which they can greatly enrich themselves, prompting the holders of the Emperor's signature to flex their political power in their partner's favor. In the cases where politics falters, these Stardeep guilds can also find the might of the Ordo Xenos and their chamber militant, the Death Watch, by their side, even when ignoring the supply of technological expertise for more esoteric or alien artifacts recovered by the Black-clad Astartes, or the rare materials needed for their maintenance. The Hearthbound offer the Ordo Xenos a most invaluable resource, one whose demand has skyrocketed in recent years. A safe and contained environment in which to study the limbs of the Great Devourer and their rampant evolution. Discovering an effective way of bringing them swift death to which the Xenos cannot adapt without having to resort to the methods of Inquisitor Cryptman is an endeavor in which the two factions are involved like diamonds yet to be unearthed. So much so that agents of the Ordo, sometimes even whole Death Watch kill teams, join their combat miners' expeditions, ranging from the precise extraction of valuables, the dispatching and recovery of dangerous newly bred bioforms, to straightforward cleansings of alien numbers, or simply for the more inexperienced Astartes of their squads to receive training fighting this particular breed of alien before being sent to battlefields crawling with them. and equally as often, the picks and stalwartness of the guilds can be requisitioned to join their missions across the God Emperor's domain. Him, the most venerated ancestor, uniting their purpose and voices as one.
Rock and stone for the throne!
My sincerest thanks to everyone who rode this venture until its very end. Its construction took ample research on how to best fit it into the already existing setting in a manner that both preserved the original intention, but did not break the surrounding continuity. Unlike the presentation of, say, a homebrew chapter, I tried not to delve into too many details, since this is an entire faction rather than a part of one, so I wanted to leave openings and niches in which others who are intrigued by the final product can incorporate their own twists into it. Now, please do not consider this as a replacement of the Leagues of Votan. Nothing of the sort was ever on my mind when crafting the Stardeep guilds. This was simply meant to be a fun addition for itches which have not been fully scratched. As we are at the end of the video, I would also like to extend personal thanks to Colin, also known as PancreasNoWork, for being the voice of Carl, the living ancestor. Please power strike the like button and let me know your thoughts about both the faction and any other things you would like to see videos for in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe in order to keep up with future videos. With that, I wish you all an amazing rest of your day. Do widzenia.